Hey pollinator pals, Beth here from Como Park Zoo and Conservatory, coming to you from our beautiful pollinator exhibit to talk a little bit about pollinators yet again. Now, thanks to the Legacy Amendment, we've had such an amazing opportunity to talk about the amazing pollinators that have stories of mischief and wonder and help fill our imaginations and our plates with all of the work and service that pollinators do. But there's more to pollinators than just their amazing stories. There's a lot of conservation to talk about as well, and pollinators need our help. So today we're going to bring this story a little bit closer to home and talk about some of the pollinators and plants here in Minnesota that are threatened or endangered, and talk a little bit about the ways that we can make a difference to help save them so they can keep saving us. So one of the stories most of us are familiar with is the monarch, and sometimes here in our pollinator exhibit we do have wild monarchs that do pass through our exhibit, take a little sip of nectar before they continue their long epic journey. Many of us are familiar with the epic journeys of monarchs all the way from Canada down to Mexico, where they'll spend their winter in a super generation of ultimate migrators. These species, crossing such a long distance and having such a very delicate life cycle, are really prone to any changes that might happen in their habitats. And those changes can make a big difference in their survival. And it's so important for us to protect them. Those species are really charismatic, the monarch butterfly, and there's lots of ways for us to help them. But these aren't the only species that are threatened or at risk here in Minnesota. In fact, we have a few unique to just us that are really special. This really special little guy is the Dakota skipper. This small, fuzzy butterfly with wings almost impossibly small to carry its little body is a tiny but important threatened pollinator. This little guy is very special, and his habitat is as well. Another similar butterfly, and a cousin of it, is the power chic skipperling, which I think by its name alone demands all of our protection and respect. What an amazing little name for such a small butterfly. This little guy is actually endangered, and its habitat is critical, important for the survival of all our ecosystems here in Minnesota. These little guys help us out, and we need to help them. Small but mighty, these little butterflies definitely need our assistance. Another butterfly that needs our help in many parts of the Midwest is the Karner blue butterfly. This beautiful, brilliantly blue butterfly is really important to a lot of open grasslands and are very rare in the parts that they're found. A lot of scientists are doing research in their habitat to find out ways that we can better protect them and the ecosystems they rely on and that rely on them in return. And of course, a major flagship species for our area is the rusty-patched bumblebee, Minnesota's state bee. These fuzzy little guys, named for their distinctive, we just had a bumblebee fly by us right now, how great. Named for their notorious rusty patch on their abdomen, are fuzzy and incredibly important. They're actually a really rare species found pretty much exclusively within the Midwest. And here in Minnesota, one of the hot spots you can find them is right here in the Twin Cities. I've actually been trying to make a point on my walks to see if little bumblebees happen to be rusty-patched bumblebees. I haven't personally had any luck yet, but we can all make a difference by being citizen scientists, taking observations and making a difference. We can even record our findings, and we'll be sharing on our website some ways that we can do so. It's definitely important to look for these little guys and to help protect them too. There's also a lot of plants that need our help and protection as well. Pollinators help pollinate plants, and those plants need to be around for them as well. Here in the state of Minnesota, while we have lots of beautiful flowers in our gardens and even here in our pollinator exhibit, there's some really critical species of plants that need our assistance as well. In our forests and woodlands, you might find a very small, special. The Minnesota dwarf trout lily is itty bitty, only about the size of a dime. This tiny little flower is a beautiful part of our natural native understory. Invasive species changing understories can often impact what these ecosystems look like. And when those ecosystems change, everybody in it changes too. Some other plants that are really important in our area are often found in prairie areas. And here in Minnesota, in the northern prairies, we're so fortunate to have an incredible ecosystem, but it's an ecosystem on the edge. So prairie bush clover, this large legume, is part of a vibrant ecosystem, and our prairies have increasingly, through development, lost a lot of their diversity and their life. These prairie bush clovers, as well as many of our other prairie plants, have deep root systems, as well as a lot of diversity that helps promote the health of the soil and the ecosystem. And here, in one of our many breadbaskets of the United States, the health of our soil is the health of all of us. Another rare and incredible plant is the western fringed prairie orchid. And this does rely on one that's a little less charismatic than most think of. The hawk moth is a really important pollinator for this little guy. And not just is it in a vulnerable ecosystem, the prairie, but without the protection of its pollinators, insects, it would end up not existing. And look at this beautiful thing with all of its cool fringy petals. What a beautiful and incredible plant. I definitely want it to be around for a really long time. Now, I've mentioned a couple of the threats that have come to these plants here, and you're probably wondering, why are they endangered in the first place? What's happening? And there's a bunch of different things happening to our plants in this area. We have changes in our ecosystem through human development, things like development of our prairie, of our grasslands. If we lose our areas near water or our natural understories through introduced species or development, we end up losing home for plants or insects. And without those, the ecosystem could start falling apart. We also end up losing changes of diversity when we end up changing through climate change. When we end up having changes in our temperature or our climate in the long term, those patches where plants from the glacial periods had refuge, they end up losing that, and they end up not being able to continue to survive. If they don't have a space to survive here, they might not have a space to survive anywhere else. They can't migrate. Plants can't get up and move somewhere cooler. And in some cases, when they can move slightly further north, well, they're going to eventually run out of further north to go, and they could disappear forever. Now, you might be wondering the next question, which is, why would we care? It's just one flower, or it's just one insect. But first off, every species is important, and extinction, just like diamonds, is forever. And the problem with that is we lose more than just one thing. We lose all of the genetic information from millions of years of evolution. And when we lose that, we can't get it back. While new things might evolve and take their place, the history behind that, the adaptability behind that is gone, and we'll never get it back. And it's so important for us to protect it so it can be around for the future. It's really, really fantastic that we have these things, and we should protect them. And every time our ecosystem loses a species, it loses a little bit of its strength and its resilience. Every time we knock a piece out, it's kind of like a Jenga tower. It gets a little bit more fragile. So we want to keep as many pieces there as possible. And that's really, really important. Now, there's lots of ways we can help. Throughout our entire series, we've been talking about things that you can do in your backyard, from planting bee lawns and rethinking the way we garden and farm to being sensible consumers. There's even more ways that we can help as well. And stay tuned next week to learn how you can prep your backyard to make it the best backyard ever for pollinators to survive into the fall. In the meantime, check out our website for some cool resources, including additional reading on our native pollinators, as well as information about how you can be a citizen scientist to help promote and help encourage and track our native, endangered, and threatened pollinators and plant species. Until then, thank you so much, and we'll see you next week. Stay tuned.